Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we'll be reviewing the S.H.Figuarts Eustass Kid from the series One Piece. Now this is part of the Raid on Onigashima line that they've done for sort of like the Wano arc of One Piece, so it matches with a lot of the first wave of One Piece S.H.Figuarts, in particular matching with the Luffy and Law. And much like most, if not all, of the One Piece S.H.Figuarts, there's just something holding back these figures. Whether it's poor cape design, poor weight management, poor articulation, or other weird QC things, there's always something holding these figures back. For Luffy, it was sort of like a lack of accessories and not being able to store the hat on around his neck, as well as limited knee joints. The Zoro, pretty much the entire lower half of that figure, and even his arm articulation was not what we needed. The Sanji, for the most part, was really good, but he had some strange articulation in his upper body, and he lacked a little bit of external accessories like food or things like that to match better with other figures. But he was probably the best out of the bunch. Yamato was really good for articulation and things like that. Pretty easily to break the sculpt because of the sort of like pants/skirt design, and the weight distribution was so off that you needed a stand to make it work. The Law, the cape was just an absolute mess and weighed the figure down massively because of the skinny frame. I heard the Kaido was really cool but really massive, and again the cape massively weighed it down. Now we are at Kid, who has a similar problem to a lot of these other figures, has some solutions but has some other problems that arise. But anyway, we'll get right into it, enough of my rambling. So out of the box, Captain Kid has got 5 faces, as well as an extra face for Luffy. He's got several different hands, as well as a base, and that's it. He's not a super crazy like effect sort of character. It would be nice to have some effect parts or like little chunks of metal that you could pose around, but for the most part, it's the figure and faces. And a lot of that comes down to the figure's gimmick, which we will be getting into. But I feel the aesthetic of Kid is what will carry this figure, not so much the accessories. So taken out of the box and put on a stand, here is Kid. He does need the stand, and like you can sort of balance him just right to make it all work, but it is highly recommended to use a stand. And while the cape is removable and does help massively with standing and posability and things like that, it's weird how it was designed, because the cape literally weighs about the same as the figure itself. So you're basically clipping the figure's weight on its back. Of course it's not going to be able to hold up that sort of weight, and like the base seems like a last minute solution to a problem they just could not figure out. Putting like a soft goods style thing, or like a more soft material, or just straight up hollow plastic, because this whole thing feels very heavy, would have probably solved the problem massively. But at least the cape is easily removable, whereas like for Law you had to actually like break the figure a bit to take the cape out. But that's probably the biggest knock against the figure, is that you cannot display him with the cape without a base, or bases, depending on if you do action poses, so it's a bit of a shame for that. But moving straight into sculpt and everything like that, this figure does look incredible. For the most part, a lot of the One Piece S.H.Figuarts, the aesthetic is absolutely perfect and on point. It's just that usually down to articulation or other accessories and things like that, they tend to lack. But this is a pretty damn faithful recreation of Captain Kid as he appears in the One Piece anime. Looks incredible. There is some beautiful sculpt work all throughout, some really crazy detail. The asymmetry of the design works so well. The faces look incredible. The detail of the cape is nice, even if it is very, very heavy. His metallic arm looks great. All of the scarring detail looks good, and even the paint matching between bare plastic and painted plastic is very, very good on this figure. And you can see how he stacks up against other figures in the line. So here he is next to the S.H.Figuarts Luffy, and I think that is fairly accurate that he stands a couple heads above Luffy. And here he is next to Law, so Law is just a tiny bit shorter than him as well. Here he is next to the S.H.Figuarts Sakura, so you can see how They stack against other figures in the line, the Marvel Legends Cyclops, and the Jada Toys Ryu. So moving right along to posability, he's got a ball joint at the head and neck. It is pretty easy to pop off the head if you move the neck or the head a little bit too far down or up. It's a little bit restricted, which is a shame. I mean, he's got a really bulky neck, it sort of makes sense, but I would have liked just a little bit more out of it. The cape is in sort of like 4 segments, so there's like a hinge on either side which lets you move it up, as well as a hinge at this sort of like base of the back, and then just the main sort of core section where it's actually attached to the back, and you can just pop that off, and it massively helps with the articulation now. So again, ball joint in the head and neck, not a huge range, but he can look down pretty okay. And again, his head popped off because it's very easy to rub the head up against the neck and pop it off, similar to a lot of the S.H.Figuarts Vegeta figures. The arms can move out that far, and the shoulders look a bit funny, like the Amazing Yamaguchi figures almost, but it can do a full 360 rotation. There's an upper arm swivel, and bend at the elbow, and a little swivel at the wrist, and the fingers are partially articulated. They've got hinges sort of like sculpted in, but each finger only has one hinge, and the thumb has like a ball joint around the side as well as a hinge. And the other arm, similar to normal Figuarts, swivel at the upper arm, bend at the elbow, ball hinge at the wrist. It's got a ball joint in the upper chest, which allows for a decent amount of crunching forward and back. The back detail is crazy on this figure. There's some side to side, swivel at the waist. He can kick forward and back that far. The legs do feel a little bit loose considering the weight this figure carries. Swivel at the thigh. You can do the splits that far. Bend at the knee, as well as pivot at the ankle and bend at the toe. And that's pretty much it. It's a pretty decent figure. He does feel a little bit loose in some areas, which I don't think helps the cape weight distribution thing that much, because if he had way more solid legs, I think the cape wouldn't be as much of an issue. But again, they could have used lighter materials for the cape, so there's a lot of problems there. And the limitation of the fingers does bother me a bit. I would have liked even more dynamic range out of those. I feel like that's the other knock against this figure, is that we sort of saw one thing but we're given another. Because it looks like you can get more out of this figure, but realistically you can just make some really simple like fist or open hand poses. Nothing super dynamic. I would have liked something a little bit more. Accessories-wise, Kid comes with 5 faces, so he's got a big wide smile out of the box. He's got a teeth closed smile. He's got a teeth gritted angry face. He's got a mouth open shouting face, as well as his comedic about to be hit not playing chicken face. Now, I've seen this scene in the anime, but I'm not up to it in the manga yet. But it did seem really funny. And with that face, he finally pairs with Luffy and Law, because Law had that face and came with the optional part with Luffy, and so you can finally recreate that scene with all 3 of these worst generation captains. You do also get an angry face for Luffy, where he's got completely white eyes, and his mouth has got this sort of like cartoony sort of Popeye angry look, and it looks really good. I'm very happy with that face. And yeah, that's the Kid loadout. You can get some pretty decent poses out of him because of how expressive his face is. And the posable fingers, while I do want more out of it, they are nice to have. But it does make the overall loadout seem lower because you only have swappable hands for one arm, so it makes it seem just a little bit smaller than usual. But again, for the most part, it's pretty fine. Again, I would have liked some metal options, like some floating metal pieces or bits that can come off of the arm or something like that. It would have been cool to have. I understand why they didn't do it, but just a little extra something would have been cool. But you can get him into some pretty okay poses. Any dynamic pose will probably require more than one base, and that's exactly what happened with me. I got him into an aerial pose and I needed 2 bases to hold him up because there's just so much weight on this figure and it's a bit of a shame. But if you remove the cape, you can still get him into pretty dynamic poses, but you will still probably need a base if you put him in the air. And yeah, it's fine, but it's not my favorite S.H.Figuarts, not by a long shot. The aesthetic is just so good, and that's one of the problems with the One Piece line, is that they look good, but they just don't feel good. And you really, really want them to succeed. And the upcoming Ace looks very, very good. Amazing assortment of accessories. Looks like they're finally like stepping up their game, and that is Premium Bandai. The pre-time skip Luffy and Nami look really good as well. The P Bandai Shanks again looks really, really good. The P Bandai line in general, it looks like they're pulling out all the stops. And the newly announced pre-time skip Zoro looks like he's addressed literally every single problem the first Zoro had, which makes me want them to revisit that post-time skip Zoro. I imagine they will, and make him like shirtless with the bandana, like how I've seen his design when he fights King, or most of the time when he's in post-time skip. And I think that that would be a good way to revisit that design, or that sort of like post-time skip Zoro. But it does make the old one look a bit crap. But yeah, that's pretty much it on Kid. He's a good figure, but not a great figure. I do think they still need to figure out what's going on with this line. But that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you all next time.